Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into something vital, often invisible, but increasingly a flashpoint. The intricate web of undersea fiber optic cables that power our digital world.
Absolutely. They're the hidden foundation.
Yeah, and they're not just passive pipes anymore, are they? They're rapidly turning into, well, a key battleground in global competition, especially across Asia, like the South China Sea and the Pacific.
That's right.
So the big question we're tackling is, what happens when these crucial lifelines become contested territory?
It's a massive question. And the scale of our reliance is just staggering. We're talking trillions and daily financial transactions, streaming, cloud computing, pretty much everything digital.
Wow.
And this infrastructure, it's morphed into this critical geopolitical asset, especially when you look at the dynamics in Asia. It's not just about bandwidth, it's about influence, about control.
Okay, so that really sets the stage. Our mission for this deep dive, then, is to unravel how these networks are now central to global power plays. We're drawing on sources covering key players: Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam.
A really crucial part of the world for this topic.
Exactly. And we'll zero in on that intense competition, specifically between the U.S. and China for, control and influence over these cables, particularly those vital routes under the South China Sea and across the Pacific. Okay, let's unpack this. The lifelines of the digital world. Undersea fiber optic cables. We've touched on the strategic angle, but let's nail down why these cables are just so indispensable. I mean, the numbers are kind of mind-blowing, aren't they?
They really are.
They carry something like, what, 95 to 98% of all international internet traffic?
That's the figure, yeah. Almost everything. Emails, video calls, financial data. It's all flowing through these physical lines on the ocean floor.
And you mentioned finance. Nearly $9.5 trillion in daily transactions rely on them.
An incredible number. It really shows they are the absolute backbone of modern communication, the global economy, even national security. No exaggeration there.
So why cables? Why not satellites? I mean, satellites feel more high-tech, right?
Well, what's fascinating here is that cables still win out for several key reasons. It really comes down to physics. You get superior speed data travels near the speed of light in fiber, much faster than a round trip to a geostationary satellite.
The latency issue.
Exactly, that delay. And then there's just massive capacity. A single modern cable can carry terabits per second. Satellites just can't match that kind of volume efficiently.
Okay.
Plus, cables are much more resistant to interference.
Very-
Think bad weather, solar flares, that kind of thing doesn't really affect them. And believe it or not, over the long haul, they're often more cost-effective to operate for this kind of bulk data transfer than maintaining a whole satellite constellation.
So they really are the high-speed data highways.
Essentially, yeah.
Wow.
High speed, high capacity, low latency superhighways connecting continents. They make our instant global world possible.
And the network itself is huge. You said over 559 active systems, stretching like 1.5 million kilometers.
It's a vast, vast web. Imagine that crisscrossing the ocean floor. But it's not uniformly spread out. There are these critical areas, these choke points.
Right, like bottlenecks where lots of cables come together.
Precisely. Think the Red Sea-Suez Canal. It's a huge corridor between Europe and Asia. Singapore is another massive hub for Southeast Asia. Then you've got places like Malta and Gibraltar connecting Europe and Africa.
And these choke points, they're vulnerable because so much is concentrated there.
That's the key risk. High concentration means if something happens, an anchor drop, an earthquake, maybe something deliberate, you risk multiple major cables failing at once.
Like cutting off several highways simultaneously.
Exactly. The impact could be continental, affecting millions, billions in trade. It's a significant vulnerability.
And these failures aren't hypothetical. You mentioned they happen quite often, like 150, 200 incidents a year globally.
Yeah, it's surprisingly frequent. And the striking thing is about two-thirds of those are caused by human activity.
Really? What kind of activity?
Mostly fishing. Trawlers dragging heavy nets along the bottom, snagging cables, dredging operations too. But probably the most common culprit is shipping accidental anchor drops.
An anchor just slicing through a cable?
Easily. These anchors weigh tons. Even armored cables can be damaged or severed. Environmental stuff happens too. Of course, underwater landslides, strong currents, earthquakes. But human factors dominate.
So, given how often this happens, what are they actually doing to protect these cables? It sounds like a constant battle.
It is, and there are measures. In shallower waters near coasts where most fishing and shipping happens, the cables get extra protection. They're wrapped in steel wire armoring, sometimes multiple layers,
Okay.
and they try to bury them in the seabed near shore using these special plows that basically dig a trench.
Hiding them away.
Exactly. Plus, there's coordination, mapping the routes, telling fishing fleets and shipping companies where the cables are, setting up no anchor zones, and using things like ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, to monitor them. It's a continuous effort, often international.
And we've seen the impact of disruptions recently, right? Those African cable breaks earlier this year, February and May 2024.
Yes, those were significant. Involved several key cables in the Red Sea SA, SEACOM, AAE-1, EIG.
And wasn't there talk about the Ruby Mars ship's anchor being involved in the February incident, a ship damaged in the regional conflict?
That was widely reported, yeah. And it really highlights this dangerous intersection, geopolitical conflict, spilling over and damaging critical civilian infrastructure like these cables. It drives home how they're now on the front lines.
What was the immediate fallout in East Africa?
It was pretty severe for some. Countries like Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Mozambique saw big drops in internet traffic, anywhere from 10% to over a third in some cases.
Oh, a third of the internet just gone.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
It hits everything: financial services, mobile money, businesses, healthcare, basic communication. Just grinds things to a halt.
But you mentioned some countries handled it better,
Yeah.
like Kenya and Uganda.
Right. They seem to minimize the impact quite well. And the key was redundancy. Their telecom operators had learned from past incidents and invested in capacity on multiple different undersea cables.
Smart planning.
Absolutely. So when the Red Sea cables went down, they could reroute traffic through other cables landing elsewhere. It's a powerful lesson in building resilience through network diversity.
And the cost of fixing these things must be huge.
Oh, it's substantial. Just the physical repair of a single deep-sea cable can run around $2 million.
Uh-huh.
And that's before you even count the massive economic losses from the traffic disruption.
Lost business, lost productivity.
Exactly. Plus reputational damage for the providers.
Yeah.
And the cost of buying emergency bandwidth from other operators, which can be very expensive. And the repair itself is complex. You need specialized ships, good weather, finding the fault miles down, then painstakingly splicing fibers thinner than a human hair.
Takes weeks, potentially.
Weeks, easily, just for the whole process. The actual physical fix might take days, but getting there, finding it, waiting for conditions, it all adds up. Yeah. Preparedness and redundancy are absolutely critical for any nation today.
A critical digital crossroads.
Okay, let's shift focus to ASEAN. This region is always seen as a geopolitical pivot point, right? Balancing big powers.
Traditionally, yes, a key fulcrum.
And now our sources say this centrality is extending into the digital world too. Singapore especially seems key here.
Very much so. Singapore has become a major hub for undersea cable landings. It's a gateway for digital information flowing in and out of Southeast Asia, thanks to its location, stable environment, good infrastructure.
A digital entrepot, almost.
You could say that. And ASEAN as a whole has massive digital potential. You're looking at over 670 million people, a huge young population, 224 million aged 15-35, very digitally active.
So a booming digital market.
Absolutely. The digital economy was already near $200 billion in 2022, projected to hit $330 billion by 2025. That attracts a lot of global tech investment. Cloud giants, e-commerce, you name it.
But here's the catch. Maybe. Despite all that potential, there's a hurdle. So what does this all mean for ASEAN's digital future? Our sources point to a lack of sort of homegrown core digital tech.
That's a major challenge, yes. The reality is that key foundational technologies, AI, advanced cloud computing, core 5G tech, are largely dominated by global powers, mainly the U.S. and China.
Meaning ASEAN relies heavily on foreign suppliers.
For the most part, yes. Especially for things like 5G infrastructure, you see Huawei, ZTE from China, Ericsson, Nokia from Europe being the main players providing the kit.
And does that create issues with digital sovereignty?
It certainly can. There are challenges when powerful foreign tech companies operate locally but maybe resist local regulations on data, like where it's stored or how it flows across borders. This makes it harder for ASEAN nations to assert control over their own digital space.
So this dependence makes ASEAN a sort of digital battleground.
Or an arena, yeah. An arena for the strategic competition between the U.S. and China. Their digital development gets caught up in that rivalry.
How has ASEAN's own strategy evolved to deal with this?
It's definitely matured. Early plans, like the Asian ICT Master Plan, were mostly focused on just getting infrastructure built, attracting investment for basic connectivity.
Laying the groundwork.
Right. But the latest plan, the Asian Digital Master Plan 2025, or ADM 2025, it's much broader, much more strategic. It covers cybersecurity, digital services, the whole tech ecosystem. It shows a much greater focus on sort of autonomous thinking and building regional capabilities.
So they're moving beyond just being consumers of tech.
That's the goal.
The new objectives seem clear: integrate more closely within Asia and digitally, get better collective control over network and data security, and boost their combined bargaining power globally.
Exactly. It's a push for more digital self-reliance and regional strength in a very competitive world. The U.S. China undersea battleground.
All right, let's really get into the heart of it. The U.S. China contest over these cables. China seems to have a very clear, proactive strategy here.
Oh, definitely. It's been explicit policy for years.
Like their 13th five-year plan back in 2016, already talking about building smooth international communication facilities and optimizing sea cables.
Yes, laying the groundwork early. And then Xi Jinping heavily promoted the digital Silk Road concept in 2017, which really folds this undersea cable expansion into their broader Belt and Road strategy.
So it's about projecting digital influence globally.
Absolutely, extending their digital footprint alongside their physical infrastructure projects.
And how are they doing it? What's the mechanism?
A key element is substantial government subsidies for their domestic companies, particularly HMN International.
That used to be Huawei Marine, right?
Correct. Huawei sold a majority stake to Hengtong Optic Electric, but HMN is still a massive global player, fourth largest cable contractor, over 20% market share. And these subsidies allow them to use what's often called predatory pricing.
Undercutting the competition significantly.
Drastically. They can bid much lower on projects, making it very hard for others to compete purely on commercial terms. It's a strategic play to gain market share and secure footholds in critical infrastructure.
Like that peace cable they finished in 2022, connecting Pakistan, East Africa, Europe.
Exactly. A prime example of securing strategic data routes.
But it's not just building their own cables. Sources mention China also using, let's say, obstructionist tactics,
Yeah.
especially in the South China Sea.
Yeah, there are reports of them using administrative measures like deliberately delaying permits or creating difficulties for other countries trying to lay or repair cables in waters China claims.
Forcing them to take longer, more expensive routes.
Effectively, yes. Avoiding the most direct path, which often runs through the South China Sea, adds cost and complexity for competitors.
And how does this tie into their broader claims there?
Well, China claims an exclusive economic zone, an EZ, over pretty much the entire South China Sea, and they interpret this to mean they have sovereignty over subsea activities too, including cable laying.
So controlling the seabed gives them leverage over the data flowing above it.
Precisely. It turns the South China Sea from just a military issue into a critical choke point for economic and communication infrastructure as well. Huge strategic leverage.
Okay, so what's the U.S. counter strategy? They obviously see these cables as critical too.
Critically important, yes, both for economic reasons and perhaps even more so for national security. The big concern is preventing rivals, especially China, from potentially intercepting data or disrupting communications.
Spying or sabotage fears.
Essentially, compromising intelligence, military comms, financial data. That's the worry.
So they launched initiatives like Clean Cables.
Right. As part of the broader Clean Network program started around 2020, the idea is to secure communication infrastructure by excluding what they deem untrusted vendors,
Right.
primarily Chinese companies linked to the state.
And they've changed regulations too, like the FCC rule about U.S. ownership.
Yeah, the FCC now requires at least 10% U.S. ownership or control for cable landing licenses. It's a way to ensure some American oversight at these critical entry points to the U.S. network.
Making it harder for companies flagged as security risks to get landing rights.
Exactly, and we've seen more direct interventions too. Remember that big cable project proposed around 2018? California, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, involving Amazon, Meta, and China Mobile.
Yeah, what happened with that?
The U.S. government effectively blocked it, citing concerns over China Mobile's involvement and the potential security risks. It shows the U.S. actively setting higher bars for projects involving Chinese firms, trying to create barriers.
Pushing companies to choose sides almost.
It certainly puts pressure on them. And another tool is sanctions.
How do sanctions play into this?
By sanctioning certain Chinese tech entities, the U.S. creates a secondary sanction risk. So any non-U.S. company dealing with those sanctioned firms could face U.S. penalties themselves.
Making partnership with those Chinese firms risky for everyone else?
Exactly. It indirectly discourages collaboration on sensitive projects like undersea cables.
So this is all part of that bigger picture phrase we keep hearing. U.S. China tensions surge as tech and mineral wars intensify.
Absolutely. The undersea realm is just a key front in that broader tech and geopolitical rivalry.
And the U.S. is pushing alternatives too, like Open RAN.
Yes, Open Radio Access Network. The idea is to create more diverse and interoperable wireless networks, reducing reliance on single suppliers, especially ones like Huawei. You see USAID funding things like the Asia Open RAN Academy in the Philippines.
So promoting U.S. tech standards and influence in the region.
That's definitely part of the strategy. The State Department is actively promoting cybersecurity, digital cooperation, holding workshops on 5G and Open RAN in ASEAN. It's about strengthening partnerships and offering an alternative to the Chinese model, regional hotspots and real-world impacts.
Let's zoom into some specific hotspots. Taiwan seems like a particularly critical case here, doesn't it? Given the unique pressures it faces.
Absolutely. Taiwan is perhaps one of the most vulnerable points in this entire global network.
Why specifically?
Its global connectivity almost entirely depends on undersea cables, and given the tensions with China, the threat of a communication blockade is very real. Plus, its critical landing stations, Danshui, Bali, Tuching, Fengshan, are quite concentrated geographically.
Making them easier targets.
Potentially, yes, vulnerable to physical attack or sabotage that could cut Taiwan off digitally from the world. That would be devastating for its economy, defense, even just basic communication.
And haven't there been incidents already? Cables connecting Taiwan to its smaller islands being damaged.
Yes, sources report multiple instances where cables linking Taiwan proper to islands like Matsu have been cut or damaged, allegedly by Chinese fishing or dredging vessels.
Is that accidental or?
Well, that's where the concept of gray zone conflict comes in. These incidents could be deliberate acts disguised as accidents. It creates pressure, disrupts life, but stays below the threshold of open warfare. Attribution is difficult.
Making it hard to respond. Like that incident in the Baltic Sea you mentioned, the Chinese ship and the Finland-Germany cables.
The alleged Yipeng 3 incident, yeah. While details might be contested, it illustrates the type of ambiguous threat Taiwan faces. It really underscores their need for better maritime monitoring, faster incident response, and international cooperation to deal with these gray zone tactics.
So what's Taiwan doing about it? They can't just rely on cables.
They're actively working on alternatives. Investing in low-orbit satellite systems is a big one. Think Starlink, like Ukraine has used so effectively. It provides a resilient backup.
Smart move.
And they're also boosting their own rapid repair capabilities. Having ships and crews ready to fix damaged cables quickly is just as vital as having backups.
Shifting back to Southeast Asia more broadly, countries there face tough choices, right? We mentioned Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam using Huawei for 5G.
Yes, and the Philippines has worked with Huawei too, Myanmar with ZTE. These decisions often come down to balancing immediate needs, getting advanced digital infrastructure built quickly and affordably against the geopolitical pressures and security warnings, mostly from the U.S.
It's a real tightrope walk. Economic needs versus strategic risks.
Exactly. They need the infrastructure for their booming digital economies, but they don't want to get caught too tightly in the U.S. China crossfire or become overly dependent on one side's technology.
And looking at the cable infrastructure itself in ASEAN, it's quite significant overall, nearly 19% of global landing points.
Yeah, 246 active landing points across the region, but it's unevenly distributed. Indonesia has a huge number, 139, the Philippines 71. Then Malaysia, Singapore have fewer, but are still major hubs.
But there are big disparities within ASEAN too.
Definitely. In terms of digital infrastructure, data centers, computing power, countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand are relatively advanced, but others like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar lag significantly behind.
Which must make ASEAN's goal of digital integration pretty challenging.
It does. That internal digital divide complicates efforts to build regional resilience and act as a unified bloc in the digital sphere. ASEAN's strategic playbook.
Okay, so faced with all this, the big power competition, internal differences, the sheer importance of digital with ASEAN's actual game plan, sources suggest it's not just about signing agreements anymore.
Right. The understanding is that achieving real digital centrality isn't just about diplomacy. It's about having concrete control over the critical infrastructure. Meaning focusing on building up local capabilities, more data centers within ASEAN countries, more domestic computing power, developing their own algorithms, taking ownership of data production, storage, processing, and transmission.
So moving from being just a location for cables to being a controller of the data ecosystem.
That's the strategic imperative. It allows them to be more than just a market or a battleground. It lets them be influential players, ensuring data critical to them stays regional and under their own rules.
But that push for local control must create some friction with the U.S. and China, who also want access and influence there.
Naturally, it challenges the expansionist digital strategies of the major powers. It's a declaration of wanting more digital autonomy.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, sources outline a kind of three-pronged approach for ASEAN: cooperation, balance, and constraint.
That seems to capture their multi-layered strategy. Well, yes.
Let's start with cooperation, especially on data transmission, the cables themselves. ASEAN's geography is a huge advantage here, isn't it?
Absolutely. Straddling the Malacca Strait, lots of coastline, perfect for landing cables.
Yeah.
It's a natural crossroads, so they're actively cooperating to develop more cables.
Both within the region and connecting outwards.
Exactly. You see internal ASEAN projects like the Malaysia-Cambodia-Thailand MCT cable or the Myanmar-Singapore-SIGMARS one, and they participate in bigger regional projects too, like IAX connecting India, Singapore, Thailand, the ADC cable linking China, Japan, Singapore, and others, and the upcoming SJ2 cable connecting South Asia to Japan via several ASEAN nations.
So building density and diversity to become an indispensable hub.
That's the strategy. More routes mean more resilience and more strategic importance globally.
Okay, the second prong, balance. This sounds like classic ASEAN diplomacy applied to the digital world.
It really is, often described as two-sided betting.
Meaning?
They encourage competition between the big external players, U.S. cloud providers versus Chinese ones, European 5G suppliers versus Chinese ones. Let them compete for business within ASEAN.
And the benefit for ASEAN is?
They can leverage that rivalry to get better deals, better pricing, maybe technology transfer commitments, more localized services, keeping their options open, avoiding overdependence on any single source, using the competition to their advantage.
Smart. And the third prong, constraint. This is about rules and regulations.
Yes, building robust internal digital regulatory frameworks, especially around tricky areas like data privacy and cross-border data flows.
Trying to set their own terms for how data is handled within the region.
Precisely. It's crucial for enhancing their digital sovereignty and strengthening their collective voice when negotiating with big tech or other global players.
But isn't that hard to do collectively, given the different laws in each ASEAN country?
That's the main challenge, yes. You have diverse approaches. Some countries lean towards strict data localization, wanting data kept onshore, like Vietnam or Indonesia. Others, like Singapore, have laws more like Europe's GDPR, focused on protection standards wherever the data is. And there isn't a single regional body enforcing common rules yet.
So it's still a work in progress.
Definitely. But they are actively engaging in global forums like UN groups working on cyber norms and digital governance. They're advocating for international rules that are fair to developing countries, trying to shape the global digital environment to better suit their interests. Outro.
Well, that was quite the journey into this often unseen digital battleground. It's crystal clear that these undersea cables are far more than just infrastructure. They're central to communication, the economy, security.
And absolutely central to the geopolitical competition we're seeing play out, especially between the U.S. and China, with Asia right at the heart of it.
And ASEAN isn't just caught in the middle. As we've discussed, they're actively playing a complex game, cooperating, balancing, constraining, trying to carve out their own digital destiny.
Exactly. Pursuing the sophisticated strategy to manage dependencies while pushing for more autonomy and influence, it really raises the question of how these strategies will keep evolving as technology changes, as geopolitical pressures shift. What does that mean for how interconnected or perhaps how fragmented our world becomes, especially as that line between physical cables and digital power gets blurrier?
As a powerful question to end on. The ripples from this undersea competition will be felt for years, affecting everything from how you browse the web to the global balance of power. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.